Some stories are written backwards before they become beautiful. When Tina Fey walked onto the Tonight Show stage with that sharp wit and knowing smile that had made her comedy's most celebrated storyteller, nobody expected her to reveal the most personal chapter of her educational mission. Jimmy Fallon had planned an insightful interview about Tina's latest book. The audience was ready for the razor-sharp observations and brilliant wordplay that always came with a Tina Fey appearance, but what Tina was about to confess would silence Studio 6B and prove that sometimes the most powerful stories come from minds that work differently than everyone else's. The cameras were rolling. The audience was already captivated by Tina's magnetic intelligence, and then she spoke 11 words that changed everything. Different brains create different magic. That's what makes stories special. What came next wasn't just television. It was a revelation about learning, creativity, and the sacred truth that what society calls a disability might actually be a superpower waiting to be unleashed. Tina Fey had always been known for her linguistic precision and storytelling brilliance, the writer who could craft jokes with surgical accuracy, who turned personal awkwardness into universal comedy through the power of perfectly chosen words. But what audiences didn't know was that Tina's relationship with language had been hard-won, shaped by her own learning challenges that had taught her to see written communication as a puzzle to be solved rather than a natural gift to be taken for granted. The writing workshops had begun 8 years earlier, during a period when Tina was reflecting on her career trajectory and questioning how she could use her platform to make a lasting impact beyond entertainment. After reading about the growing awareness of dyslexia and other learning differences, Tina had been struck by how many creative individuals throughout history had thrived despite, or perhaps because of, brains that processed information differently. I started researching famous writers, comedians, and storytellers who had dyslexia. Tina later explained, Richard Branson, Whoopi Goldberg, Steven Spielberg, Agatha Christie, all these incredible creative minds who were told they were stupid in school because they couldn't read or write the way everyone expected them to. Tina's own childhood had included struggles with reading comprehension and writing organization that hadn't been diagnosed as learning differences at the time, but which had shaped her understanding of what it felt like to have a brain that worked harder than others to achieve the same results. I was always a smart kid, but school made me feel like something was wrong with me, Tina remembered. I could understand complex concepts when they were explained verbally, but putting thoughts on paper felt impossible. Teachers thought I was lazy or not trying hard enough, but I was actually working twice as hard as everyone else to produce half the results. The inspiration to work with dyslexic children had come through a conversation with a friend whose 10-year-old daughter had been diagnosed with severe dyslexia and was struggling not just with reading and writing, but with her self-esteem and belief in her own intelligence. This little girl, Maya, was brilliant. She could tell the most incredible stories orally, had this amazing imagination, could solve problems in ways that surprised adults, Tina recalled, but she couldn't write those stories down because her dyslexia made traditional writing feel impossible. She was starting to believe she was stupid, which broke my heart because I saw so much creativity in her that the school system couldn't recognize. Tina's first session with Maya had been revelatory. Instead of focusing on traditional writing mechanics, Tina had encouraged Maya to tell her stories out loud while Tina transcribed them, then worked with Maya to understand how her natural storytelling instincts could be translated into written form using alternative methods. Maya's stories were incredible, full of unexpected plot twists, complex characters, emotional depth that many adults couldn't achieve, Tina explained. Her dyslexia wasn't preventing her from being a writer. It was just preventing her from being a traditional writer. We needed to find different tools and methods that worked with her brain instead of against it. That breakthrough had inspired Tina to research alternative approaches to teaching writing and storytelling to children with learning differences, Working with educational specialists and dyslexia organizations, Tina had developed an informal program she called Story Minds, workshops where dyslexic children could explore narrative creativity through methods that accommodated their unique neurological wiring. Traditional writing instruction assumes that everyone's brain processes language the same way, Tina said, but dyslexic brains often have incredible strengths in visual thinking, pattern recognition, and creative problem solving. Instead of trying to force them into traditional molds, we needed to find ways to harness those strengths for storytelling. Over 8 years, Tina's Story Minds workshops had reached 52 children with dyslexia, ranging from age 7 to 16. Each child's journey was unique, but all shared the common experience of having been told they weren't smart enough or capable enough to be successful writers, despite having rich inner lives and creative potential. I worked with this 12-year-old boy named Alex who couldn't write a coherent paragraph on paper. But when he told stories using voice-to-text software, he created these elaborate fantasy worlds with complex political systems and character relationships, Tina remembered. His dyslexia wasn't a barrier to storytelling, it was just a barrier to traditional writing methods. Tina's approach incorporated various alternative techniques, voice-to-text technology, visual storyboarding, collaborative writing where children could dictate while Tina or other adults transcribed, and story structure exercises that used drawing and mapping instead of traditional outlining. We discovered that many dyslexic kids are incredible visual storytellers, Tina explained. They might struggle with spelling and grammar, but they can create compelling characters, build complex plot structures, and understand narrative pacing in ways that come naturally to them. We just needed to find ways to capture those stories that didn't depend on traditional writing skills. The emotional transformation in the children had been remarkable. Kids who had believed they were failures in language arts began to see themselves as creative thinkers with unique perspectives. Many discovered that their dyslexia-related challenges had actually developed strengths that enhanced their storytelling abilities. There was this 14-year-old girl, Sophie, who came to me convinced she was the dumbest person in her class, Tina recalled, with obvious pride. She struggled with reading and writing. But when we started working together, I realized she had this incredible ability to think in three-dimensional story structures. Her dyslexic brain naturally understood how to weave multiple plot lines together in ways that linear thinkers couldn't achieve. The most profound moments came when children realized that their learning differences weren't deficits, but different ways of processing information that could become creative advantages. Sophie's breakthrough came when she created this complex mystery story using a combination of drawings, voice recordings, and collaborative writing, Tina said. When she shared it with her class, her teacher was amazed by the sophistication of the narrative structure. For the first time, Sophie's dyslexia led to recognition for her creative abilities rather than shame about her academic struggles. Several children who had completed Tina's workshops had gone on to pursue creative writing in high school and college. Using the alternative methods, they'd learned to bypass their dyslexia-related challenges while leveraging their creative strengths. I got an email last month from a kid I worked with 5 years ago, Tina shared. He's now in college studying screenwriting, using voice-to-text and visual storyboarding techniques we developed together. He said our workshops taught him that being dyslexic didn't mean he couldn't be a writer. It meant he was a different kind of writer with unique strengths. Tonight's appearance on The Tonight Show was supposed to focus on Tina's latest book, which explored themes of finding your authentic voice and embracing what makes you different. Jimmy had planned to discuss her writing process, maybe explore her approach to comedy writing, definitely tap into the brilliant wordplay that made her such an entertaining guest. The interview had started with Tina's characteristic wit and intelligence. She had shared insights about her book's themes, demonstrated her approach to crafting jokes, and charmed the audience with her ability to turn everyday observations into brilliant commentary. But when Jimmy asked about her writing process and whether she'd always been naturally gifted with words, Something shifted in Tina's expression. The question had been meant to explore her creative development, but it had touched on something much more personal that Tina had been considering sharing publicly for the first time. You know, Jimmy, Tina said, her voice taking on an unusual vulnerability, I think the assumption that some people are naturally gifted with words can be really harmful to kids who struggle with traditional writing but have incredible stories to tell. The audience grew quieter, sensing that Tina was moving into territory that was more personal than her usual sharp observations. That sounds like you have some experience with that, Jimmy said with genuine curiosity. Tina was quiet for a moment, her usual rapid-fire wit replaced by thoughtful reflection. I do. Both personally and through work I've been doing with kids whose brains work differently than what schools expect. Kids with dyslexia who've been told they can't be writers when they actually have some of the most creative minds I've ever encountered. The studio was completely focused on Tina's words now, the energy shifting from entertainment to something much more meaningful and personal. You're working with dyslexic children? Jimmy asked softly. Tina's eyes filled with tears, a sight that was particularly powerful, coming from someone known for her emotional control and sharp humor. For the past 8 years, I've been running writing workshops for kids with dyslexia, kids who've been told they're not smart enough to be storytellers when they actually think in ways that create incredible narratives. The audience was completely silent now, witnessing a side of Tina Fey that transcended her comedy persona, the raw empathy of someone who had transformed her own struggles into healing for others. Jimmy, can I tell you about something that's taught me more about storytelling than my entire career? Tina asked, her voice growing stronger despite her tears. Please, Jimmy replied, clearly understanding that something profound was being shared. Tina took a deep breath and spoke directly to the camera. I teach alternative writing methods to dyslexic children who've been told they can't be writers. 52 kids over 8 years, helping them discover that different brains create different magic. Jimmy's expression changed completely as he grasped what Tina was describing. You're teaching writing to kids who struggle with writing. I'm teaching storytelling to kids whose brains work differently than traditional education expects, Tina replied gently. These children have incredible creative abilities. They think in 3 dimensions, see patterns others miss, understand complex narrative structures intuitively. Their dyslexia isn't a barrier to creativity, it's just a barrier to traditional writing methods. Tears were streaming down Jimmy's face. Can you tell us about one of these kids? Maya was my first, Tina said, her voice becoming tender. 10 years old, brilliant storyteller, but couldn't write those stories down because of severe dyslexia. She was starting to believe she was stupid, which was heartbreaking because her oral stories were more sophisticated than many published books. Tina paused, gathering herself to continue. We worked together using voice-to-text, visual storyboarding, collaborative writing. Maya discovered that her dyslexia had actually given her strengths in visual thinking and pattern recognition that made her stories incredibly complex and engaging. What happened to Maya? Jimmy asked through his tears. Maya is now 18 and starting college with a creative writing scholarship, Tina said, with obvious joy. She uses the alternative methods we developed together, and her professors are amazed by the sophistication of her narrative structures. Her dyslexia became the foundation for her unique storytelling voice. The audience was openly emotional, many people crying as they witnessed this revelation about Tina's private ministry to children with learning differences. Tina, how has this work changed your understanding of creativity? Jimmy asked. It's taught me that there's no one right way to be creative, Tina replied with quiet conviction. These kids showed me that brains that work differently often see stories in ways that linear thinkers can't access. Some of my best comedy insights have come from understanding how dyslexic minds process information and find unexpected connections. As the segment concluded, something unprecedented happened. The entire studio audience rose in sustained applause that lasted over 4 minutes. But it wasn't just appreciation. It was recognition of something transformative, acknowledgement that they had witnessed education reimagined through empathy. Tina's revelation became one of the most shared Tonight Show segments in the program's history, bringing national attention to dyslexia and alternative learning methods while inspiring educators to reconsider how they approach children with learning differences. Most importantly, Tina's disclosure had shown that sometimes the most powerful stories come not from minds that work the same way as everyone else's, but from minds that see the world through a completely different lens.